I have heard so many good things about the KZ ES4, and especially for a price of under 20 euros, they're supposed to punch way above their weight class, and that piqued my interest so much that I want to get a pair into my own hands to see how true it actually is. And I guess that's exactly what we are going to find out today. And starting off with the design and build quality, I have to say that generally I really like the build quality. I mean, the cable actually feels quite good, even though it also tangles up quite a lot, as you can see already here, because if you just want to roll them up like that and put in your pants pockets, this won't really stay that way, especially since also the hooks will make it even harder to untangle them. But the really good thing about these cables are that, as you can see, they are replaceable, and the replacement costs about 4 euros I've seen on GearBest. And with this 2-pin, you can actually also use KZ's, for example, own Bluetooth neckband cable and just turn them for about 18 to 20 bucks into a Bluetooth earphone. I really like that, especially if you don't take so much care of your cables. Replacing them is pretty easy. What I also like is the position of the remote control. I'll get into that later. It's pretty easy and convenient to reach, but unfortunately there is no volume control. That would have kind of been even better, but due to being standardized, especially also for iPhones and Android, I guess I know why. About those chassis, I have to say, at first they actually look quite big, but it doesn't have especially no negative impact on the comfort on fit, but I'll get into that later. So they are sitting actually quite secure, and I really like those tips, I even have to actually say, because they have these kind of ridges, and maybe they don't offer the best seal and isolation, which I will get into a little bit later, but therefore they are quite subtle in your ear, but they seal enough, and they're actually very kind of unobtrusive in your ear and don't really bother me at all. So I really like that. And let's actually already put them in, and let me show you of how they look in my ear. So I would generally say, due to them being quite big, the good thing is that the biggest part actually is outside of your ear, and inside your ear they actually don't feel big at all, because I've actually had generally smaller chassis, but they felt way bigger here. And the good thing is that due to this a little bit of a less, I would say, proper seal, you don't really feel them pushing so much into your ear, so the earplugs, the ear tips sit in your ear. And therefore, maybe, like I said, the isolation isn't maybe all that good, because what I've noticed that mids and highs get a little bit more through than on some others, but it's still absolutely more than enough. But that allows for a very good comfort, and especially with those hooks that I want to show you here, which are completely flexible, as you can see here. This makes it very easy to just wrap them around your ear and then fixate, and you should definitely take full use of that very flexible part, because that will allow you to get it very safely and securely in your ear, but with a still very good comfort, because with those hooks you don't really feel any of the weight, which isn't much in the first place already. So I really like the comfort, I really like all that, and as you can see here, pretty easy and convenient to reach the remote control. So I'm fully pleased to hear, which already brings me to the next point, which is how easy they are to power and how the control works. And here I have to say, surprisingly very easy to drive. That is something that I see very happily, because, for example, with my OnePlus 5T, I even had quite a lot of reserves, which means that if you have just about an average headphone jack on your phone, which is what I will guess most will use it with, you should still have more than enough volume. So all is good here. Even though I have to say, especially with my OnePlus 5T, there was a barely, but still a little bit of audible white noise. It didn't really bother me, not even on podcasts and so on, but due to, depending on which kind of source you are using, you will have that. For example, with the iFi X-Can, I did not have any background hiss, so it depends a little bit on the quality of your headphone jack. So, which brings me to the controls. They work like this. 1 click is pause and play, 2 clicks is the track forward, 3 times is track backwards, and if you long press, you get the Google Assistant. Now, let's talk about the next thing, which would be soundstage and imaging. And I have to say that it is actually surprisingly wider and especially more open and airy than anything that I've heard in this price range. I would expect especially for this soundstage, you have to pay like at least 70, 80, or if not even 100 bucks, at least from the ones that I've tried. I mean, imaging on its own isn't really super spectacular, because what I've noticed is, for example, that instruments come more from the sides where the vocals are still centered, but it's pretty much everything on ear level. So it doesn't go much to the front, a little bit, especially the vocals, but there is not too much imaging in the front what's going on. So it's mostly on the sides, which is pretty normal and maybe something that you actually might even like. So that's that. About the signature, and that's also just like the sound and imaging. actually a very big part of the personal preference, because I would generally say they are a little bit on the colder side with a little bit on the brighter upper end, but that also comes especially with the upper mids and lower highs with some glare to it. That also though comes with the powering, because with the i5 that glare was pretty much completely gone. But with the OnePlus 5T, it was still there. It wasn't a big issue, but that was one of the smaller gripes that I have with the sound quality. Otherwise, we have some actually quite decently, just minimally pushed forward bass, actually way less than I expected, because when I asked some people up front or beforehand how they see the bass, they said it's pushed, and I expected them to be very boomy. But this is actually not that much of a mainstream sound, I think. This is actually more of an audiophile, quite neutral, very pleasant, and quite, I would say, mature sound. I really like that. And the highs, I would say, are even a little bit more pushed than the mids and then the highs. The rest though is actually, than the bass I meant. And obviously the rest is actually pretty neutral, I have to say. I really like that. But I would also generally say that due to the glare and the little bit more pushed highs, that the sound is a little bit more demanding of you than it is relaxed. So it doesn't really allow you to just listen to the sound and just enjoy it so much. It wants you to be there all the time. And that's something, especially for people who are actively listening, exactly what you might want to. If you want to relax, then there are other alternatives out there. And with this a little bit more demanding thing, it also just is maybe not quite as long-term listenable or enjoyable. So about the bass, I would say it is a little bit, like I said, boosted, but just a little bit. But the big thing I have to say, which is pretty much the highlight for me, is that it integrates so well into the rest, because it never bleeds into the mids, it never bleeds anywhere into that. And it is actually maybe not the, I would say, most extreme sub bass or the super tightest bass, and it's ever so slightly actually even boomy, but it is so well balanced and integrated into the music that I would say, if you talk about bass, mids and highs, this is the highlight. And then I would see the highs there, and the mids, since they're a little bit laid back and not quite that big of a thing, I would say these are still quite good. Because, like I said, at the upper part of the mids, the glare starts, and especially for vocals of females, you notice that a little bit more, and it can be a little bit odd, and glare is a little bit hard for me to actually explain, but I hope you get what I mean. But for the vocals, I would also say that especially female vocals at certain situations can sound a little bit thin and also a little bit cold. And then the highs, I have to say, generally I actually really like them a lot, because they are quite open and airy, and they generally never give you any feel of dullness or kind of muffled, which is something that I absolutely can't stand. So we don't have that here, so that's why it's still very good. And the highs definitely are pushed, but there is pretty much no roll off. They pretty much play all the way down, and they extend actually quite a lot, which maybe the bass or so doesn't do so much, but I really like that. A little bit maybe towards the upper end, they are a little bit harsh, maybe a little bit shrill. They could be a little bit smoother, it would have been nice, but generally, like I said, a lot of details, and that's maybe more important for me. Now, for what kind of music do they work well with? I have to say, very good with pop. But especially for bass heavy music, I did not expect them to fit that well, because you don't maybe get the most extreme, not the heaviest, punchiest bass, but it is a so pleasantly, slightly pushed bass, and it integrates so well and just works out absolutely top. I really like that. And I mean, there are maybe some headphones that work better for people who want a lot of bass, but this is a really nice bass experience. And what also works pretty good are ballads and also classical music, because of the really nice highs and the clarity of the general sound. That's what I like so much. Even though I would say for metal and rock, in certain situations, especially if it's maybe a little bit lower quality, then they sound a little bit, just tend to be a little bit like annoying or a little bit odd, because then it can be a little bit thin and shrill or something like that. I mean, I generally do a good job, especially for rock, but for lower quality old school metal, I noticed that, I mean, that's complaining on a high level, it's still very good, but that's maybe the weakest part where it plays bit, but still absolutely enjoyable and better than most things. Which actually already brings me down to the alternatives, because I don't really know any at that price point besides, for example, the Biodynamic Beat Bird. They cost about $25 to $30, but I would see them like this. They are definitely way more mainstream balanced, because noticeably more bass, less highs and so on. But therefore you get, for example, the better cable. They are maybe a little bit more convenient to put in your ear, because you don't have the hooks, and therefore maybe a little bit also more decent in the ear, and more convenient if you just want to plug them in without thinking much about it. But in terms of sound, they are not nearly as kind of mature or kind of, I would say, sophisticated at all. and that we also get no remote control at all, and the cable isn't replaceable. So these are quite a few downsides, I would say, and I would definitely prefer this one over the Beat Birds if it comes down to quality, comfort, and general. So that is what makes this headphone so great and makes the recommendation so easy, because the value, what you get here is so good, because it's comfortable, the cable is replaceable, you could turn it into a Bluetooth cable, it is pretty easy to drive, it is pretty sophisticated in terms of sound, and you just get so much for your money with a few downsides that actually don't really break anything, because okay, cable does tangle up, which happens on so many other cables. There is a little bit of glare, which is maybe, if I would have to point out something, the most annoying part, which with the proper source can be avoided, especially also as well, which is nice to see. Like I said, the upper higher end part, a little bit shrill, maybe a little bit more fatiguing, and maybe therefore not for everyone, like for example also due to the hooks. But if you like the hook system, if you like an actually pretty, I would say almost audiophile sound, for this price, I cannot really recommend them anymore. Even though I also have to say, for about that same price, you also get something like the KZ ZSN that are supposed to be great as well. I've also requested those already. They should be on the way, but until I can tell you which ones there are better, I'm gonna let you at least know that I can easily recommend these without any big issues, because these, if you want to get into good sound, are definitely way better than anything that you get on the normal market, like for example everything that is stock with your phone there, or any typical headphone that you get around 10, 20, 30, 40 bucks. So I would say they can compete with many, actually up to maybe easily like 50 euros. And then it also obviously depends on how they behave and what they are for, but pretty nice job, pretty nice job. Okay, so that's it. Hope you liked it, and otherwise I would say until next time, bye.